Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have the latest from the live radar. From the latest weather warnings, as we have seen an escalation today with the rain warnings upgraded to the amber warning level through this morning's updates, and that is because we are not only seeing this rain being more relentless and slow moving, but it looks like it's even heavier with some really torrential bursts, especially during Friday afternoon into the evening. Now, we've been monitoring this for a number of days, been highlighting this all the way since the beginning of the week, if not the weekend, the risk of heavy rain. But I didn't think it was going to get to the amber warning level, but it's simply because the weather front is going to become stationary across England and Wales, all because of the big block that is now developed across Greenland and will eventually bring cold air in for all. We can already see a bit of snow there for Scotland, but much colder conditions is coming. For the next 40 hours, it's going to provide standstill rain across much of England and Wales. Now, as we'll see from the latest UKV, it is going to rain a lot. There are going to be some stronger winds, and this system has actually been named. The low pressure that's bringing the rain, that is the centre for this weather front, is called Storm Claudia. Now, it's been named by the Spanish Met Office primarily because they are going to see some exceptionally heavy rain like we're seeing now, and even some stronger winds on the southern flank of the system. So yes, it is technically a named storm, but we're not going to see the same sort of wind as we have seen in other previous storms named by either the UK Met Office, Ciaran, or other Met Offices across Northern Europe. So yeah, it is a named system, but for us, it's primarily the rain that's going to cause issues. We'll be able to look at that, of course, as said on the UKV, and then we'll progress, have a look at the longer range, because of course, yes, we've got these torrential conditions over the next day or two, but then it turns much colder with potential widespread mid to low single digit highs into early next week, and overnight frosts as well, really harsh frosts, and the risk of some snow in places into next working week. So really quite eventful now over the next week or so. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which do like and subscribe. Now, to start on the live radar, you can see we've got two areas of interest at the moment. We've got the stationary weather front moving in. Now, it is going to progress a bit further northwards to where it is right now, but pretty much the northern extent of this rain is where the main banding will become stationary. So it's still going to move another 50 to maybe 100 miles further northwards, and then it is going to peter out a little bit overnight before it gets more moisture and reinforcements into Friday. And then we are going to see some really torrential pulses moving northwards, and I said could dump a lot of rain. We are looking quite widely, an inch or two, maybe 3, 4, 5, or even 6 inches, especially across some of the higher ground of Wales, down towards the Brecon Beacons. I think at the moment is the area that is going to potentially see the most. Not only, of course, it is in the firing line, but it's also a lot of relief rainfall with the higher ground and hills there. So heavy rain already, and for many this is setting in, and it's going to pretty much non-stop rain for the next 48 hours. Yes, over varying degrees of intensities, but all the way through to kind of Saturday, maybe more 36 hours into Saturday morning probably for some. And yeah, it looks really quite horrific. Now, further northwards, we've got another weather front, and this is the boundary between the slightly milder air. We've got very mild air to the south, slightly milder air in between, and then very cold air just to the north. And you can see some snow across some of the higher ground of Scotland already. Bit of mixture further southwards, and this is along that dividing line, and we've got the Arctic air just lingering to our north. Now, it looks like this is going to plunge and push in, but it's going to be another 48 to 72 hours, probably Monday by the time it pushes all the way to the south coast. So the cold air is getting held at bay by this low for the time being, and that's why we are going to see all this heavy rain where that air masses do collide. Now, temperatures this evening, calling this just before 9 p.m, you can see exceptionally strong temperature contrast at the moment. It's going to become even stronger through tomorrow, and that's why the rain is going to be so heavy. But very mild further southwards, low teens, and then up towards Scotland, freezing. So yeah, big temperature contrast, but the cold air will eventually win out. It will win the battle, but it does take a few days to get there. Now, if you look at the weather warnings, you can see we've got widespread warnings. We've still got the widespread yellow rain warning for Storm Claudia from 6 a.m. tomorrow until 6 a.m. on Saturday. So the warnings actually don't come in force for another good few hours, another 9 hours. But you can already see we have got heavy rain still pushing in. So the main impacts through Friday into this early hours of Saturday, but you can see the rain is totting up already. You can see we're looking widely an inch or two, 30 to 50 millimetres, 60 to 80 and then up towards 100 millimetres across parts of Wales. Brecon Beacons looks the most likely area where we could see 4 or 5 inches, and we have got separate amber warnings. We've got some wind warnings issued here for parts of the Peak District and up towards northwest Wales. Again, for Storm Claudia, we're going to see easterly winds 50 to 60 over these higher ground, maybe 70 in a few spots. So a windy period, but nothing I normally classify as terribly stormy when we're only seeing 50 or 60 over the most exposed areas. Normally when we're seeing 50, 60 more widely, that's when we start to talk about pretty stormy conditions. But of course, the main impacts here are further southwards for the wind, and of course is rain from Storm Claudia. Now, we've got 2 amber warnings here. Now, you may be wondering why we've got a big amber warning covering much of the Midlands and into parts of Wales. And then why do we have a separate amber warning for parts of South Wales? And this is because the one across South Wales there for the Brecon Beacons more specifically, and sort of heading just towards the English border, that is where we have the higher risk of seeing maybe even a red warning. There is scope for red warning. Doesn't mean we're going to see it issued, but there's scope. And the reason for that is if you look at the impact matrix, you'll be able to see that here we are medium likelihood and medium impact. We're looking at 40 to 60 quite widely, up towards 80 millimetres. And you can see it might be exacerbated strong easterly winds and maybe even some thunderstorms late Friday into the afternoon and evening. As I said, some really torrential pulses moving through. And then for South Wales, you can see we're looking maybe slightly higher totals, 50 to 75. There's a chance we can see 100 to 150. And again, when you add on those torrential pulses and maybe thunderstorms, we could get some flash flooding in places. So not only surface water flooding, saturating the ground and bringing big increases in those river levels, but with really torrential bursts after many hours of more moderate rain. We could see some pretty severe conditions through rush hour tomorrow, and you can see we have got low likelihood but high impact. So at the moment, the prospects here are for even more severe conditions, but the chance of that are a little bit lower, and that's why we have got it in still amber, but it's a slightly different warning, and it means that there is scope if the likelihood tomorrow increases, if the modelling all agrees overnight, and on the live radar we can see really torrential bands moving in, the Met Office could upgrade this to red. And then as we head into Saturday morning, still got that widespread yellow warning, expecting, as I said, most of that rain to expire and clear off around Saturday morning, so about 36 hours from now. But yeah, even if the rain only fell at 1 or 2 millimetres per hour, which is, moderate, it's not, light rain, but moderate, many areas will see a good 30 to 50 mils. Now, if you look at the latest UKV, you can see we've seen some rain and snow across northern areas through this afternoon, and you can see the heavy rain starting to push in for southern areas, and you can see it slowly shift northwards. It peters out a little bit through the early hours of Friday into some lighter bands of precipitation, but still rains, and you can see into mid-morning Friday, the rain starts to pick up again, starts to turn heavier, and then you see some torrential pulses moving in, some yellows and oranges there through the afternoon. Into the early hours of the evening, it drops off a little bit, and then we could see some further heavy and even thundery showers moving in around 8, 9, 10 p.m. And those slowly falter into the early hours of Saturday, but you can see still rain all the way into Saturday morning before petering out around lunchtime into the afternoon. And then you can see the floodgates open to northerly winds, cold air for all pushers in Arctic air, wintry showers down northern and eastern coast, and maybe even a few heavier showers, and small little disturbances could produce more widespread precipitation at times. We'll have to see how this little disturbance moves down the spine of the British Isles, could give more widespread precipitation. And from the looks of the upper air temperatures, the dew points, and even the surface temperatures here, you can't even rule out a bit of low-lying falling snow. Not going to be seeing probably settling snow across low-lying areas, definitely higher ground there. But low-lying areas could see some early season falling snow. And you can see the upper air temperatures, big temperature contrast over the next day or so. You could see that temperature contrast from 7 or 8 degrees across the south to minus 7 or 8 degrees across the far north, and that causes the big areas of rain. Through the weekend, cold air, slowly winds during Saturday, Sunday, and you can see it floods in there into Monday and Tuesday. The floodgates open into Monday, and then much colder conditions continue streaming in from the north and the northeast. Dew points well down towards freezing or below freezing. Again, indications that wintry showers will be wintry, or precipitation at least will be wintry as we do head there. Or at least there is a high chance of that being a possibility. Now, if you look at the max temperatures, you can see as we head into Friday, very cold in the north, around freezing across some higher ground of Scotland, low single digits elsewhere, and 7 or 8 degrees just to the north of the weather front during tomorrow afternoon, where the cold air starts to undercut. The far south, 15, 16 degrees, and that's kind of 8, 9, 10 degree temperature contrast across the Midlands there. That is what causes the big rain, and you can see it at the surface here. So once that precipitation clears, we are going to see those temperatures dropping really quickly during Friday, Saturday, and into Sunday. And you can see by Sunday afternoon, it's not very cold, but it's average to slightly below average, 7 or 8 degrees for many. Into Monday, temperatures dropping away quite considerably, but by the afternoon, they don't rise much. Look at that, only 5 to 7 at best, close to low single digits, if not freezing, further northwards. And then as we head into the early hours of Tuesday, look at that, a widespread frost develops, widely down to -1 to -5 degrees. And then into the afternoon, not getting much above 4 or 5 degrees across much of England, Wales, Scotland, even colder than that. So proper cold there arrives Monday through to Tuesday, and most likely will last much of next week before slowly faltering Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And we see it on the latest GFS. You can see we've got the big battleground at the moment. Eventually northeasterly winds will push in and looks very cold all the way to the end of next week, where eventually the high pressure topples, and you can see by next weekend, milder air will eventually slowly move in. You can see it's more of a westerly flow for a time, but already at 384 hours, we see a more disturbed North Atlantic. Blocking patterns do return, and potentially we could go colder once again. Late November, early December. As I've said numerous times, even if the cold spell breaks down quite quickly next week, by Friday, Saturday, the fact that this big block has developed, very unlikely that it's a one and done pattern. Very likely that we'll see reoccurring trends. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to, develop anything more significant later on, but very rarely do we just see a big, massive block like we've got now suddenly appear and disappear in the space of a week or two. Normally, it hangs around for a longer period of time, and we do see reoccurring patterns. So I'm not surprised that the runs here are starting to hint at a bit more blocking there. Late November, early December. GM is pretty similar. Again, northeasterly winds continuing to push in. Eventually, the high topples next Friday into Saturday. And then even out to day 10, even though, yes, low pressure comes in off the Atlantic for a time, it doesn't actually go terribly mild because we still got a bit of a mid-Atlantic ridge halting those lows. So even though, yes, a small push of milder air moves in, cold air is not too far away, and I wouldn't be surprised if we pushed another easterly back in with some of that cold air once again. If you look at the ECMWF, it's very, very similar. Northeasterly winds pushing in. The high pressure topples. Atlantic does unlock though, unlike the GM. And then all the way out to the end of the run, it still looks very Atlantic driven. But again, it's not a succinct pattern. There is still some ridges of higher pressure towards Greenland. And as said, into early December, like the GFS, we could see a return to something colder. Big pool of cold air towards Scandinavia here. You can see that, so I wouldn't be surprised if that came closer and closer. And if we did push up another block, then yeah, we could see some very cold air, even colder than we've got at the moment, or even much, much colder than what we're going to see in the next few days pushing in. And you see it in the latest ensembles, the strong confidence in this pattern. Very mild, with a lot of precipitation over the next day or two. Much colder through the weekend and the start of next week, and staying very cold for much of next working week. And then eventually, in around 8, 9, 10 days time, around next Saturday, Sunday, milder air will push in. As that high pressure topples, even though synoptically it looks like it's the end of the cold spell, we must remember cold air will remain at the surface. With the higher pressure, clearer skies, we could actually see some of our coldest temperatures in those days, even though it would cut any precipitation risk. Beyond that though, we do return close to average and precipitation picks up. So more Atlantic flow for the last 5 or 6 days of November does look more likely. Doesn't necessarily mean it's definitely going to happen, but that's what most runs are starting to show. 2 meter temperatures, another visualization here. You can see it's dropping off massively the next 4 or 5 days, dropping to around the 4 or 5 degree mark for much of next week. For a good 4, 5, maybe 6 days there, looking very, very cold. Dew points dropping off massively as well below freezing, so there is a risk of some wintriness, no matter where you are, given these dew points. Doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be winteriness. Remember, we need precipitation. And doesn't necessarily mean it's going to cause any disruption or any settling of any winteriness or any snow. It's simply falling snow in this scenario. And then ECNWF is very similar. Big drop-off, staying very cold for 4 or 5 days next week, and then returning closer to average. So strong agreement in the longer term there. But yeah, lots of disruption to come over the next 7 to 10 days with, of course, cold weather longer term that we've been talking about a lot. But then short term has cropped up quite quickly is the torrential rain during Friday into Saturday morning with storm Claudia there. Again, amber warnings issued, the risk of seeing an isolated red warning issued across South Wales. At the moment, I'd say probably not, but you never know. The runs could exacerbate it into the morning. And of course, from the looks of the live radar, if that really peps up at short notice, then we could, of course, see that red warning escalated. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but do stay safe out there over the next 24 to 40 hours. Luckily, it's not been a terribly wet autumn so far. If we had a terribly wet autumn so far, then this event would cause even more issues than it is. But not only are we going to see, big saturated precipitation event, lasting 24 to 48 hours in some spots, but for a time tomorrow afternoon, there could be a few hours where the rain is torrential, thunderstorms could mix in. So not only could we see river flooding and just generally very saturated ground, but we could see some flash flooding out there as well. So do be wary of that, especially tomorrow rush hour in the afternoon. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed subscribing new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.